Welcome to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy, where Sunday's sermon sparks Wednesday's conversation. Each week, they sit down to dive deeper, reflect thoughtfully, and wrestle with the themes of this week's message. Their goal is to explore faith more fully, ask the hard questions, and invite you into a dialogue that goes beyond the pulpit.
Welcome into the podcast, everyone. I'm Pastor Randy Moore.
And I'm Pastor Andy Payton.
Just came in from lunch. I mean, these are the dog days of summer out there, buddy. Wow.
It's warm and humid.
And it's warm.
And it's 4-H week for the Payton household and for Vanderburgh County as
You're
well.
going to be outside a lot.
Yes. Tonight is the dog show, the agility show at the 4-H fairgrounds up on the north side. And they delayed it. We're not starting until 7:30 tonight because of air quality and heat.
Okay.
And so we're going to cook tonight.
But it's a delay, not a cancellation or postponement.
We can't. We have to move forward with the show.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, with the soul check-in, I got another little bit of taste of what it's like to be in your generation and your age, because one of my daughters and one of my wife's sons came in for the July 3rd weekend. Mm-hmm. And then we enjoyed the weekend with them, and then they skedaddled and left the grandchildren with us, which is nice. But I came to appreciate that those in your generation with kids at home, man, there's a lot going on.
It's a lot. There's a lot of spinning plates, calendar-wise, event-wise, activity-wise. Yeah.
And especially for a pastor, because a pastor really doesn't keep set hours necessarily, even if they're set.
It's a moving target, right?
Yeah.
So it could be a lot to juggle. The calendaring of everything and making sure, now where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then the calls that come from church that have to be responded to. Wow.
It's hard to be present.
Yeah.
I mean, from my end, Randy, to be honest with you, like we talk about how is it with our souls and that kind of thing. And I just get to a point sometimes where the word that comes to my mind is frazzled. You get kind of frazzled and you can't be present. Mm-hmm. You're trying to be present. You can't.
Right.
And your brain is just not at 100%. And so.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that set up, let's jump in. We're in July. We've been talking about the dog days of summer. We're in July, and of course, we just celebrated on the 4th of July, 250 years since the independence of our nation. And so you decided to build a sermon series for the month. Tell us about your thinking going into that, and maybe talk about the first 2 weeks.
Let's just reflect on the Christian idea of what does it mean to be free. And of course, just generally speaking, our faith tradition would say freedom doesn't mean do whatever you want. Freedom really comes about really by living into who we have been created to become. So as we live into who we've been created to be, it's then that we find the freedom for our souls. And so the first Sunday set the stage for the whole thing, freedom to love. The more and more we love, the freer we become, because that's who God has made us to be. The second sermon was free to pray. And really, I think to sustain love over the long term, my experience has been, Randy, you have to pray. You have to connect to a source beyond yourself to really sustain love over that long haul. And so that was the second installment of the series. And then the third was you. Wonderful sermon. I loved it.
Oh, well, thank you. Let me give you folks a little peek behind the curtain. Pastor Andy selects the themes, and for the longest time, you actually selected the texts. And so when you put together this particular series, you selected for the week that I was going to preach a passage from Exodus. And then so I thought, oh, great, I really love the book of Exodus, and so I can't wait to dig back into that. Then when I went back into the document, when it came time for me to prepare, that wasn't there. And so that kind of thing happens, and I asked you about it, and you said, no, I want you to do whatever it is you want to do. So I went back through and reviewed Exodus, and it carries the theme of the Bible, New Testament and Old Testament, in terms of rescue and deliverance and discipleship. I mean, the presence, the whole thing. And so I decided to talk about the freedom that we have to be agents of God's deliverance. Exodus has a lot to say about freedom.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, I mean, go back to our time capsule that kind of gave us the bigger idea for this sermon series. outside by our flagpole back in 1976 at our 200th anniversary as a nation. Our congregation here had a time capsule. On the time capsule was a verse from Leviticus where it said, proclaim liberty to all the inhabitants. And that came from Leviticus, which of course is tied closely to Exodus as well.
Right.
And so this concept of liberty, this concept of freedom is central to the Hebrew people, and it's central to understanding Scripture. So it's undeniable. Now the debate in question becomes, of course, like, well, what does it actually mean to be free? Hence the sermon series. So.
Yeah, and so I selected a passage that's not familiar to a lot of casual readers of the Bible, because the passage immediately after the passage that I preached on is the account of the birth of Moses and how the Pharaoh wanted all the Hebrew boys killed, and so Moses, in effect, would have been killed, but he was saved, and people know that story about how he was placed in the little container and put in the river, and then was discovered there and ended up being saved. People know that story, but I looked at the story that precedes it. It's Exodus 1:15-22, and I love the story, so I'm going to share it here. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphra and the other Puah, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. And that's followed up by the Moses story, yeah, who would have been thrown into the Nile.
Right.
He was placed into the Nile, but for protection.
Yes. It's an interesting story, it really is. Yeah, I mean, and you really did a great job with it on Sunday. It's one of those moments where a scripture speaks in a timeless way, for sure. You know, it was clear this is much more than just a story from long, long ago in a land far, far away. This is a scripture that really has a truth to convey, and I loved how you.
Well, thank you.
You shared that.
And I told our congregation, I said, I don't know nothing about birth and babies, and I don't really know anything about midwives, but our mothers certainly know about delivering babies, and I'm sure some of them have used the assistance of a midwife in delivering their children. And my own daughter, Meredith, in both of her pregnancies and both of her births, to my first grandson, Walter, and then to her second son, Calvin, they were both born with the assistance of midwives. And so I thought, instead of me as a guy trying to speak about giving birth to babies or about midwives, I talked to Meredith about it, and just to get a little bit of background on midwives. And it occurred to me that it happens much the same way today as it happened back then. Certainly there are differences, but Meredith said that midwives conduct themselves with the notion that a woman has innate wisdom about birthing children, and wisdom certainly came into play for Shiphra and Puah. And then I want to share this quote that Meredith shared with me as kind of a definition from the International Confederation of Midwives. Midwives offer care based upon a partnership, a relationship of trust, reciprocity, and equity between the midwife and the woman. Each midwife strives to ensure that they do not impose their professional and personal power onto women. Rather, through the provision of respectful, personalized, continuous, and non-authoritarian care, a midwife seeks to establish relationships in which each woman is the primary decision maker. And that's the definition. And then I asked Meredith if she would share more about her own experience with it. And she said that Walter, her first son and my first grandchild, she suspected that Walter, because of the difficulty of her pregnancy, that Walter would have been an emergency C-section in the hospital. She said that he was sunny side up. I had never heard that term. And he was big. And her labor was really long, she said. She said, I had the same women with me from start to finish. They were trusting and supportive, constantly reassuring me that my body knew what it was doing. And this is an idea I never thought of before. Mm-hmm. My body knew what it was doing. She said, they fed me because birth takes a lot of energy. She said, I was encouraged to get up and move as much as I wanted. I was just completely calm, and it was a completely calm and supportive atmosphere. The collective wisdom was very apparent. I felt a lot of pain, but never an ounce of fear or anxiety. So that was helpful, at trying to understand the role of the midwife. And so I asked the question connected to the title of the sermon, do you think God needs our help? The kind of help that offered by Meredith's midwives. Do you think God needs our help delivering babies? Do you think God needs our help delivering God's people from slavery, from genocide, from evil? And then I asked the question, which contains the title of the sermon, do you believe that we are free to act as agents of God's deliverance? I think most of us, by experience, would answer yes to that, but there is a doctrine that some Christians hold to that God really doesn't need our help.
Right.
Yeah, and I understand that on one level. We want a God that's powerful and
But it can become problematic, as you're suggesting, right? I mean, if God's so sovereign that everything happens because God's the direct cause of it, then it kind of lets us off the hook. It doesn't really kind of. I mean, we're off the hook.
Yeah,
really.
We're off the hook, and I'll go here now where I didn't go in the sermon. If God is all-powerful, then there are some certain difficult questions that have to be asked of God. You know, if God has all the power, why do things go on in our world that could be prevented by an all-powerful God?
Right.
Yeah.
It just depends on how you define all-powerful.
Yeah.
God's capable of doing anything, period. I don't know. I mean, we started, as Wesleyans, obviously, we started at a different place. Within the Protestant world, there's the group that starts with the sovereignty of God, of course, like you're talking about. But then in the Wesleyan circles, we would not deny God's sovereignty. We would debate about what that means a little bit. But ultimately, we begin with the idea that God is love. Therefore, we're created as relational beings. Therefore, in a sense, there are certain things that are not going to happen unless we do them. Just on a baseline level. And and the scripture speaks to this, right?
Yeah.
Like you're suggesting, if the midwives, they don't, if the midwives don't do what they did.
Yeah, it doesn't get done.
It doesn't get done. Like the, or in their case, the babies are going to be killed if they like stop.
Right.
And, you know, if they listen to the Pharaoh's order, there's a problem. And then you go into like the New Testament, especially as well. Many of the miracles Jesus performs, unless someone responds to something that Jesus did, the miracle is never going to happen. My favorite story with that is the water into wine. Jesus says, go fill the jugs up first.
Yeah.
Then the miracle would take place. And so there's this idea that God is collaborating with us, really, in a sense.
Yeah. So I guess if we want to take a strict definition of salvation, then of course God is responsible for salvation. But even at that, we're told to work out our own salvation. So we have a role even in that. I think you hit on it that, like in the Protestant Reformation, there was maybe a bit of an overreaction to what was going on in the Catholic Church, and so you end up with some rules and things that are they're just more strict than they need to be. And so I think we need to remind ourselves and to remind our people that God uses us. It is God's power that's at work, but God gives that power to us to work good in the world. Yeah,
I mean, in the Hebrew Scriptures, it says that we're made in the image of God, right? So, okay, who is God? Well, one of God's basic job descriptions is God is the creator. Well, we're made in the image of the Creator. So therefore, we're called to be creative.
Right.
And there's certain things that God is inviting us to do. And really, God's power is working through us as we begin to create along with the Creator. We live into that image-bearing kind of idea. And we find fulfillment in that, too. I have to believe Shiphra and Puah found a lot of fulfillment in refusing to obey Pharaoh's order, because I would say they're working along with what God's trying to do. in that moment. And there's always fulfillment there when that happens. Doesn't mean it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
You mean they get called in the principal's office in a big way in this story.
Right.
But
Well, that confrontation is interesting. The king of Egypt in verse 15, as I already read, said to the midwives, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. And that stopped me short, having thought about Meredith, my daughter, and her experience with Walter, and then again with Calvin. It's like, can you even imagine what it would be like as a midwife, someone
Right.
whose life is dedicated to bringing life into the world, and they were literally birthing a nation there
Sure.
in the book of Exodus, to be told to kill rather than to bring into life, but to kill.
right.
Yeah. Sometimes we
It's
read these
astonishing.
things. Yeah. Sometimes these are Bible stories. Of course, it happens in a. Okay, but take it seriously and say,
Yeah.
what if?
Right. And what led up to this moment too, right? I mean, one of the things I think you said something about in your sermon, or maybe it was in a scripture lesson or something, but it says Pharaoh did not know about Joseph. This Pharaoh, this leader,
Right, yeah.
did not know the history.
It was another generation, a new generation.
There's a new generation of people who didn't understand their history.
Uh-huh.
And so that had a direct correlation with this order that's given to the midwives.
Mm-hmm.
This Pharaoh had decided not to study the history of what brought him to this place, and therefore it led them to a state of suspicion about things, and they didn't see the pitfalls maybe that were there from the past. And I started my brain just is spinning, like, there's so many levels of truth here. What happens when we as a people, we stop learning about our past? And we were reminded about that at our men's breakfast this week, where our speaker for the men's breakfast talked about the history of civil rights in the city of Evansville.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. James McLeod, a UE professor of history, talked about how in Evansville, for example, in the last 100 years, there were KKK rallies.
Yeah.
A lot of people might not know that, but Evansville was just a hotbed for KKK activity and this kind of thing happening right here not that long ago. And if we don't learn about these things, we don't acknowledge these things, then destructive things can begin to happen, because human nature is what it is.
Yeah.
We get suspicious and fearful, and like the Pharaoh gets suspicious and fearful, and horrible things begin to happen if we're not careful.
Well, biblically speaking, God, through Moses, rescues the Hebrew people from slavery. Then he gives them the 10 Commandments to say, you want to stay out of slavery?
Yes.
Here's the way to live your life.
Right. This is the path to freedom.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And Rabbi Gary said that in our
Oh, did he?
podcast.
Okay, yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
he said, without the commandments, there is no freedom.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
He said, God gets them out of the bondage of Egypt, obviously. But then Rabbi Gary talks about later on, Moses gets the commandments on Mount Sinai. And he said, if they didn't get that was where the freedom came from.
Mm-hmm.
It was the freedom to live as the people God has called them to be. And without that, then they're going to slip. The Hebrew people then are going to become the very thing that they ran away from.
Yeah. And that's why the teaching of Jesus is so important. And there's always a corollary to what is happening in Exodus and what is happening in the New Testament. But Jesus was also a teacher, like Moses was a teacher. And Jesus, not only did he not do away with the law, he made it more strict in some senses. Mm-hmm. He made it spiritually more strict than that. And so, we have sometimes, as Christians, decided that, well, the law has now passed away. It doesn't really apply to us, but it most certainly does for the very 100%. Same reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's funny because if you look at the midwives, they break the law to obey what I would say is the deeper law.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but...
no, that's where we're going. The midwives feared God, and so they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live.
And they lied about it.
And they lied, yeah. In an act of civil disobedience. And I said that this was a prime example of subversive, countercultural resistance against oppressive systems. And it is. Right. And one of the things we can do is see that, apply it to today, and then we can see this. We can see pharaohs among us.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
The tendency is always there.
Right. Yeah. So this sounds political, and it is. And I said that anytime I've been dipping back into the book of Exodus, I have to dip back into my favorite Old Testament scholar, Walter Brueggemann. And on this point, he said that the church, because sometimes we get worried about whether the church is getting too political, he said that the church is political from the ground up. He said it's not liberal politics, it's not conservative politics, but it's Exodus politics.
I love that phrase.
Yeah.
It's a great line.
Yeah, he said Exodus politics are at work whenever there is a predatory economy where the little ones get eaten up by the bigger ones, and the people of power take advantage of the powerless ones.
Well, then the question I ask myself then is like, when is it enough?
Yeah.
I remember years ago, one of my daughters, they were learning about civil rights in elementary school, and we were reading a book. I think we were reading about Harriet Tubman, she's awesome. I mean, hands down awesome. And then I think Paige asked me, she says, "Dad, we're equaled now, right?" And I said, fundamentally, yes.
Yeah.
We're equaled in God's eyes, but we have a little ways to go when it comes to the way our world is right now. But then even as I say that, Randy, it's like, how do we know so we're equaled in God's eyes. How do we know when we're equaled on this side of heaven?
Yeah.
You know,
in practice and in reality. Yeah.
What's that look like? What's that mean? That's a challenging something to wrestle with, for sure. I'm not sure I can explain it completely, but...
No. Well, even we talked about the Declaration of Independence, even the idea that all men are created equal was more aspirational than it was real.
Well, clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some holes in it from the beginning.
But it was something to shoot for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the ideals in the Declaration are beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm so looking forward to Josh Claiborne's talk on Abraham Lincoln's approach to the Declaration of Independence, and it's happening. We're doing this on Tuesday, of course, and the talk's going to be given tomorrow. But Lincoln had the wisdom to see that's much more than just some sort of statement that we made. That's our mission as a people, to live as if all people are equal in God's eyes. And now, what's that look like? What's that mean? That's the challenge.
Yeah, I'm going to be there for that too. I'm really looking forward to it. So Brueggemann goes on to say that the midwives represent the ultimate triumph of life and grace over the powers of death, and their actions reveal a God who stands in radical solidarity with the vulnerable, utilizing everyday marginalized people to alter the trajectory of history.
Say it again.
Using vulnerable, everyday marginalized people to alter the trajectory of history.
There's a lot in that.
Yeah. And they put their lives on the line in doing it. And the fact that they didn't do it in this act of civil obedience could have cost them their lives. So they lied to him. You've already said this, but in ethics, we ask that question: is it ever okay to lie?
Right.
And some say no, lying is always wrong, and others say it's more nuanced than that. Their lies protected, saved lives. I mean, their lies saved lives and saved a nation. If we're going to just take the story as a whole, the nation was formed in the book of Exodus. So
willingness
that's the
to
story.
deceive. Yeah. Well, MLK wrote a letter. It's called "Letter from a Birmingham Jail," where he kind of lines out. There were clergy that were pushing against the civil rights movement and what MLK was doing back in the 60s. They were saying, "You're going too far. You're going too fast." And so he wrote this letter from a Birmingham jail, kind of laying out his philosophy and the theology behind why he was doing what he was doing. I remember something about that letter because he says, I think he quotes Augustine, actually, Randy. He says, any law that's not formed upon the deeper law is no law at all, and should not be obeyed. And that's Augustine. That's Christian theology 101. Any law that's not about that deeper law of compassion and justice is no law at all, because that's not really how the world is made, and therefore should not be obeyed. And I was like, read it. It's a wonderful document.
Absolutely.
Holy moly. Because, Martin Luther King is laying out his whole just his framework for why he's doing what he's doing, and in this act of this civil disobedience in our own country, in our own time.
That's why I noted when Meredith shared the definition of what a midwife is, one of the definitions is that they're wise. Well, Shiphra and Puah were very wise. They were wise enough to have the confidence to lie. They knew what was right and what was wrong.
Right.
And to put a baby to death.
They trusted their inner voice here,
Yeah.
Yeah, like, no, how about this? No.
Right.
I mean, come on, folks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and there was a little humor, and you pointed it out when you read the scripture, and their lie was that the
vigorous.
Hebrew women are vigorous women, and they gave birth before the midwives could show up.
Well, it was in the second service. It's kind of funny because I got to that point, and I hear a couple of hesitant chuckles.
Right.
And then I go, it's okay. I think it is meant to be humorous. Don't you?
Right. It is, but it could also be partially true.
Yes.
They were telling a lie. They weren't going to say, we're doing this because of this God, because they saw Pharaoh as a god as well.
Right. They're just more vigorous, but they'd been through so much.
Yeah. And it might have been the case that the Hebrew women were more vigorous, and sometimes they did give birth, but that wasn't really the reason why they were being saved.
Right.
Yeah. So I can't remember. I spent so much time in this week. I can't remember whether I've ever heard that. It seems like I must have known it for a long, long time, but I don't know if I ever really paid my attention to this story.
It's the first time I've heard it preached upon, and good on you for finding it, man. It was inspiring.
Yeah, so we should be inspired. We should be inspired to know that, God just didn't create it and wind it up and let it go. Our God is a relational God, and God is with us and for us and needs us.
I love to hear your little inner process theology coming out, Randy.
Yeah.
Listeners will have to Google what process theology is. It's a modern theology, of course, but I heard you channeling some of that in the sermon, which certainly I appreciate that.
Well, I thought about this on the drive in here today because of what I've learned about process theology, and that is that God can be affected, and what we do has an effect, that we are optimistic and we are hopeful that God wins, and God will win, but we do have enough. This is what the process theologians say, and people who don't call themselves process theologians today would agree with this, that we're even free to destroy the planet. There is a real push among a lot of Christians today to try to wake people up to the fact that God's creation is in danger, and if we just let it go like it's all going to be okay, I mean, we could actually lose the planet.
All die.
Yeah.
Unless there's a couple of lucky people who have gazillions of dollars that can somehow fly a spaceship to Mars, which I'm going to go on a limb and say that's kind of a long shot right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a limit to it.
Yeah. Which says if we have agency, let's use it. Let's use it.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Not only to save the planet, but to save other people from.
Well, Dr. Bounds taught me when I was in my undergrad. He talked about there are sins of commission. So those are harmful things that we actively commit, things we do to one another that are bad and wrong. But then there are, he calls them, our Christian tradition calls them sins of omission, things that we omit, things we know we should be doing, in this case, helping the planet, but we are omitting it or just turning the blind eye. And I think the sense of omission is where it gets kind of quiet in the room. I mean, especially when we're talking about acts of civil disobedience and the suffering of people. And by the way, all suffering is ultimately connected to God's suffering. Doesn't matter what faith tradition they're a part of, doesn't matter what nation they're a part of. I mean, that's just as clear as it can be when you look at the scriptures. Especially, I mean, Jesus, when he's saying, as you've done to the least of these, you notice that doesn't have a religious distinction upon it.
No.
It's just, as you've done or not done to the people who are in pain, you've done to me. And so, yeah.
All right. Week 4. Is this the last week? Is this the last week?
We're wrapping up.
All right.
And very excited. Ryan Buxton's giving the message.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's wound up and ready to go. He's going to be talking about the story of Simeon and Luke. And what that means. And he calls his sermon title is The Freedom to Believe. And he asks the question, why do we choose Jesus? We can believe. Okay, we're free to practice our faith in our country however we would like. Why choose Christ?
Mm-hmm.
So
Ryan Buxton is sharp. He's our youth director. I go way back with him because his family attended Baker Chapel, which was my first appointment. And we were fortunate enough to...
We got lucky there.
Yeah, to hire Ryan here.
Yeah.
And so
very blessed to have him.
To
And
that as well.
I know, I mean, I'm really looking forward. I always love to hear people like Ryan, who's just getting started now in terms of preach. And throughout the years, I've often tried to share the pulpit with lay people. And I mean, even here at Methodist Temple, Randy, I make sure that you always get to preach once a month. And I don't know, it's just healthy for the church to hear different voices.
And for you to hear different voices, and for you to be able to worship to the degree that you can.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. That's the way the church should be.
Yeah.
Have different people sharing. So
Well, very good. That's Ryan Buxton. He'll be preaching here at Methodist Temple on Sunday. Come see us. Maybe you have a church home. That's wonderful. If you don't, come see us here at Methodist Temple. You can also worship with us virtually, and it seems like you found the podcast, so we're off to a good start that way. We appreciate that. We pray that you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy. We hope you'll join us next week. We see Christ in you.